Welcome to another 88K model railroad video, and in this video we're going to do some validation of some boards. Now, before I start, I want to touch on something. In the lower right hand corner you can see there are different color bands that I'm starting to pop up on these videos, and the bands are actually giving you guys a little heads up on what the video is about or what type of video it is. Now, maybe a week or so ago, a guy posted up a problem in the comments, and it looked like it was something that would make a good video. So what I did was I created the video, and then I put a little yellow band there, and then I had the word answer kind of embossed across it. And that was to kind of let people know that, hey, this is an answer to a particular question that someone had. So it would at least give a person that there's give them an understanding that there's a backstory to this particular video. Now, this green band is for the I'm going to use for the affiliate type videos, which kind of ties into this video here with the validation. So I bought a lot of the boards and I used them to kind of test and to validate for myself what actually works, what doesn't work. And now I've been able to validate two of the boards. Now here there's a list of 5. The WIO D1 Mini is a little too small to actually use. It's only 16 pins, and you have to add other components in order to access the pins. So I kind of push that off to the side. Then the Lowland D32, those are, I guess it's a legacy board or something, or they're phasing out because I couldn't find any of those. And I was able to find the D1 Mini and the Dev module and the Rover module. I was able to find those. But the Rover module has problems for me. Now, that particular module that I got, Rover that I got, is a camera rover. Those were all over the place, but any of the modules without the camera I couldn't find. So I thought I'll just get that and see if I could validate it. And it works, but the COM port has to be connected to the board. If you disconnect the COM port, then the IP stack collapses and you have no Wi-Fi. There's no Wi-Fi connection. And I tested it a couple of times, and as soon as I pulled the COM port off, then the IP stack went away or crashed. So I got to figure out what's going on with that. But in the interim, I've got the D1 Mini and the Dev module. Those are validated and they're working. So within the validation process, I installed it, tested it out, made sure all the ports and everything worked. Then I erased everything and I did it over. So I did it 3 or 4 times to make sure that it does come up every time. And I did run into a couple of problems. There's one, and I don't know if it's my board or if it's something in the coding, but pin number 3 didn't work, but I noticed that it was locked high when I was installing it on other in other configurations. So that's kind of unknown. It's not until I get another board on that Mini that I'll know if that pin is actually good, because I know on the first time I validated all 16 pins on that board, but then when I did it on the 3rd or 4th time, that pin stopped working. But at one time I know I validated all of the pins. So anyway, let me stop jabbering here and now getting into the validation process and letting you guys see what it takes to actually bring one of these boards up. So let's get started. So let's start off with the mini chip. And this is something that you have to kind of pay attention to. There's a Mini 1 series here. This is the ESP Mini 1 series, which is the name of a chip. And this is a mini board, but the chip on the mini board is actually a Room 32. So you could get caught up where you're looking and, let's say for example, looking for the firmware, and you look for the mini one, and you bring those bin files in and you think that you're getting it for the mini board, but this mini board actually has a room chip on it. So make sure you look at the actual chip that's on the board and get the firmware based upon the chip that you see and not the name of the board. So that can kind of run you in for a loop. So for this particular board, now we're looking at the Room 32 series chip, and then that's what we see here. So this is the ESP Room 32 series opposed to the Rover series, and then you have the Pico and then the Solo. So now, and that's what we're going to do is I'm showing you where the firmware is, because if you mess up, then you need to reflash it. Then you have to build the firmware back into the or load the firmware back into the chip or the board. Now here we're going to look at this particular board, right? So Room 32. This is the bin files, and you just click on it and download it and then unzip it. And that's what I've done here is I've unloaded, or where is it at here, and here's the firmware. So now I've unzipped all of the firmware into one directory, and now I have access to them. So you need to find the bin files or know where your bin files are located and then which one to use. And there's a bit of a twist here. If we go into the Room 32, and this is the latest, the 2.4, and here's the factory bin. Now this factory bin file is unlike the other files. This is a combination of all the files that you need. Now when you pull down one of the tools, it will allow you to put in the files for the bootloader, then the files for the partition, and then the bin, the actual bin files. Now this particular file does it all, and you have to place this file at a particular location, which is actually 0. So here, flashing the AT firmware into your device, you can select either of the two ways below to download one combined factory bin to address 0. And that's what you have to do, because what people can get caught up in is loading the bootloader and then using this factory bin, I'm sorry, the partition, and then putting the factory bin in there, and then the chip just starts running crazy because it's got duplicate what do you call it, registers. So now it's just running all over the place, and you have errors and you don't know what's going on. So when you go in to load this particular bin, the factory bin, you put it in 0, the location 0, and here, let's do it. So let's say you're using this flash, you would then let's do connect just so it gives me something. No, it's going to error out. So let's find. Let me actually connect it so we can see here. Let's see here. Okay, so let's start this up here. 15 and then connect. Let's connect here. Okay, so now you see it's loaded. Now I've got the chip connected into the USB port, and it's showing us here's the address 0. So then you choose the file, and now you would put this factory file in, say OK. And now this is going to load into 0, and this particular factory bin has all of the partitions, the bootloader, and everything. And that will get your board back to default. So this is something you need to know. You need to know how to find the firmware, which one is used by your board, and then select it and use the factory option, and then only put in the 1-0, because there's other tools, and the tools allow you to put in at a memory point 1000, then 8000, and then 10,000, and you don't need that if you use the factory bin. Okay, so now let's close this out. Okay, let's close this out. Now let's look at the chip itself. So let's do this. This gives you a little bit of insight, and it allows you to peek in the chip. So if you go into the maintenance, the WIO maintenance, if we scan for the COM ports here, we access, and then we connect to the COM port, there you can see it's actually read what's in the chip. So now we can see the allocation. So remember the bootloader, and then the OTA, the partitions, and all of that. So that's here. You can see that. So now this is this is what's in the chip now, how it's configured. So you can go back and forth as you start to do the install and peek to see what's happening. And I'll show you that here shortly. So let's take this, we close this out again, and now let's bring in the IDE.